It was a warm Saturday evening in late June when everything changed. The air was thick with anticipation as I helped set up for my best friend Mark's bachelor party. We'd been friends since college, almost 8 years of shared memories, inside jokes, and the kind of comfortable silence that only comes with true friendship. I never expected that night would redefine everything between us. The bachelor party was being held at our friend Dave's lakeside cabin, secluded enough for the typical bachelor party shenanigans, but nice enough that it didn't feel like we were slumming it. String lights hung across the deck, reflecting off the still water of the lake. The drinks were flowing, music pumping, and about 10 of Mark's closest friends were laughing and sharing embarrassing stories about the groom-to-be. Mark had always been the golden boy of our group, handsome in that effortless way, successful at his architecture firm, and somehow always saying the right thing at the right time. His fiancée, Elise, was equally perfect, smart, beautiful, and from a good family. They were the couple everyone envied, the ones who seemed destined for the white picket fence and 2.5 kids. I'd watched their relationship bloom over the past 3 years with a complicated mix of happiness for my friend and something else I couldn't quite name. As Mark's best man, I had organized most of the evening's entertainment, including the traditional stripper. It wasn't my idea. It was actually Mark's brother who insisted. But I went along with it because, well, that's what you do for bachelor parties, right? Mark had seemed on board with the plan when we discussed it months ago, though looking back, I should have noticed his hesitation. The slight pause before he agreed, the way he quickly changed the subject. But I didn't pick up on those subtle cues then. The party started off great. We grilled steaks, played poker, and reminisced about college days when we had no responsibilities and endless energy. Mark seemed happy, though I noticed he was drinking more than usual. Not sloppy drunk, but definitely using alcohol as some kind of buffer. When I asked if he was okay, he brushed it off with a laugh and said he was just enjoying his last days of freedom. It was a joke we'd all heard before, but something in his eyes didn't match the lightheartedness of his words. Around midnight, when the party was in full swing, Mark pulled me aside onto the deck. The moonlight reflected off the lake, creating this ethereal glow around us. He leaned against the railing, beer in hand, and stared out at the water. "Do you ever wonder if you're making the right choices?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the music from inside. I didn't know how to respond. Was he having normal pre-wedding jitters? Or was this something more? Before I could formulate a thoughtful answer, Dave burst through the door announcing that the entertainment had arrived. The mood shifted immediately as everyone hurried inside, whooping and hollering like we were back in college. Mark lingered on the deck for a moment longer, took a deep breath, and followed me inside with what I can only describe as reluctance. The living room had been cleared for the performance, with chairs arranged in a semicircle. Mark was guided to a chair in the center, the seat of honor. The lights dimmed, and the music changed to something with a heavier beat. When the stripper walked in, she was exactly what you'd expect. Tall, blonde, wearing a trench coat that obviously concealed very little underneath. The guys whistled and cheered, but Mark's smile looked plastered on. As she began her routine, moving closer to Mark, I watched his body language change. He became rigid, uncomfortable, his smile becoming more forced with each passing second. When she straddled his lap for a lap dance, I saw genuine panic flash across his face. "I need some air," he suddenly announced, standing up so abruptly that the stripper nearly fell. He mumbled an apology and rushed outside. The room fell awkwardly silent before someone turned up the music and encouraged the stripper to continue for the rest of us. I waited a few minutes, giving Mark some space, before following him outside. I found him sitting on the steps leading down to the lake, head in his hands. I sat beside him without speaking, just offering my presence. After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke. "I can't do this, Jason." His voice cracked slightly. "Not the stripper. I mean, yes, that too, but all of it." My heart sank. Was he calling off the wedding? Was this the alcohol talking? "The wedding?" I asked cautiously. He nodded, then shook his head, then nodded again. "I don't know. Maybe. I don't know if I'm being true to myself." He looked at me then, really looked at me, with an intensity I'd never seen before. I've been living the life everyone expected of me. The successful career, the beautiful girlfriend turned fiancée, the timeline that society laid out. But lately, I've been questioning everything. I didn't know what to say. This was Mark, confident, self-assured Mark, suddenly questioning his entire life path. "Have you talked to Elise about this?" I asked. He laughed, but it was hollow. "How do you tell your fiancé that you might be?" He trailed off. unable to finish the sentence, but I understood what he wasn't saying. The pieces started falling into place: his discomfort with the stripper, the hesitation about the wedding, the questioning of his choices. "Mark, are you trying to tell me you're gay?" I asked gently. He didn't answer immediately, just stared out at the lake. "I don't know," he finally said. "Maybe bisexual? I've never let myself explore that side of me. I've been so focused on being who everyone wanted me to be that I never stopped to figure out who I actually am." He ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "And now I'm weeks away from getting married, and I'm having a panic attack over a stripper because it just feels so wrong." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of his confession hanging between us. I had so many questions, but I didn't want to overwhelm him. Finally, he turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I need to ask you something crazy," he said, his voice steadier now. "Something that might ruin our friendship, but I need to know." My heart started racing, though I wasn't sure why. "Anything," I assured him. "The guys in there are expecting a show," he began, his words careful and measured. "They paid for entertainment, and I just ruined it by walking out." I nodded, not sure where he was going with this. What if you filled in?" The question hung in the air between us, so absurd that I was sure I'd misheard him. "You want me to, what? Be the stripper?" I asked incredulously. He winced at my tone but nodded. "Not for everyone. Just for me. Send the guys to bed. Say the party's over. I need to know, Jason. I need to see if what I'm feeling is real or if I'm just having cold feet." My mind was reeling. This was Mark, my best friend for nearly a decade. The guy I'd helped move apartments 3 times, who'd held my hair back when I had food poisoning in Cancun, who knew all my secrets, well, almost all of them. Because the truth was, I had been harboring feelings for Mark for years. Feelings I'd buried so deep that I barely acknowledged them to myself, let alone to anyone else. I dated men casually over the years, never anything serious, and Mark knew I was gay. But he never knew that he was the reason my relationships never lasted, the measuring stick I held everyone up against. And now, here he was, asking me to essentially perform for him, to help him explore his sexuality weeks before his wedding. "Mark, this is a lot," I said, trying to gather my thoughts. "If you're questioning your sexuality, that's something you need to address with Elise before the wedding. And using me as an experiment." I trailed off, not sure how to express the conflicting emotions swirling inside me. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately, to finally have some version of what I'd secretly wanted for years. But another part knew this could destroy our friendship, not to mention potentially hurt Elise deeply. "You're right," he said quickly, standing up. "It was a stupid idea. Forget I said anything. I'm drunk and confused and—" He started walking back toward the cabin, but I caught his arm. Our eyes met, and something passed between us, an understanding, a possibility. "Wait," I said. "Let me think about this." My mind was racing through all the potential outcomes. If I said no, Mark might never explore this side of himself. He might go through with the wedding, always wondering, possibly living a life that wasn't authentic to who he truly was. If I said yes, it could ruin our friendship, complicate his relationship with Elise, and potentially break my own heart all over again. But there was also the possibility that this moment of honesty could lead to something real, something true for both of us. "Okay," I finally said, the word barely audible, but not as some bachelor party stunt. Not with the others around. This needs to be private, and it needs to be about you figuring yourself out, not about entertaining drunk friends. Relief flooded his face, followed by nervousness. "Thank you," he whispered. "I'll tell the guys the party's winding down, that I'm too drunk and need to sleep it off." We went back inside, where the stripper was just finishing her routine. Mark announced that he wasn't feeling well and was calling it a night. There were some groans of disappointment, but most of the guys were drunk enough that they didn't put up much resistance. Mark paid the stripper generously for her time, apologizing for the abrupt end to her performance. Within half an hour, the cabin had quieted down. Some guys crashed in the living room, others in the spare bedrooms. Mark's brother was passed out on the deck. And then it was just Mark and me, standing awkwardly in the kitchen. "We don't have to do this," I said, giving him one last chance to back out. He took a deep breath. "I want to. I need to know, Jason." He led the way to his room at the end of the hall, checking twice to make sure no one was awake to see us. Once inside, he locked the door and turned to face me. The room was dimly lit by a small lamp on the nightstand, casting long shadows across the walls. Mark sat on the edge of the bed, looking both terrified and determined. I stood there, frozen, not sure how to begin. This wasn't exactly a scenario I'd prepared for. I don't exactly have a routine planned, I said with a nervous laugh. Mark smiled, some of the tension breaking. Just be yourself. Do whatever feels natural. He reached over to his phone and put on some music, nothing too loud, just enough to create a backdrop and mask any sounds from the rest of the guys. Taking a deep breath, I tried to channel confidence I didn't feel. I started moving to the music, awkwardly at first, then with more rhythm as I let myself get lost in the moment. I wasn't a dancer by any means, but I tried to remember what I'd seen in clubs, what had caught my attention when others danced for me. I slowly unbuttoned my shirt, revealing my chest inch by inch. Mark's eyes were fixed on me, his expression a mix of curiosity, desire, and something deeper I couldn't quite name. As I let my shirt fall to the floor, I felt incredibly vulnerable. This wasn't just a physical exposure, it was laying bare years of hidden feelings. Mark's gaze traveled over my body, and I saw his breath catch. "You're beautiful," he whispered, almost to himself. The words gave me courage. I moved closer to him, still swaying to the music, and gently took his hands, placing them on my hips. His touch was electric, sending shivers up my spine. For a moment, we just stayed like that, me standing between his knees, his hands on my hips, our eyes locked. Then, slowly, deliberately, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to my stomach. The kiss was gentle, questioning, but it ignited something in both of us. I threaded my fingers through his hair, encouraging him. What started as an experiment quickly transformed into something much more genuine. There was no performance anymore, just two people discovering each other after years of unspoken longing. His hands explored my body with a tenderness that made my heart ache. When our lips finally met, it felt like coming home, familiar yet thrillingly new. The kiss deepened, years of repressed feelings pouring out in a flood of emotion and desire. We spent hours exploring each other, talking, touching, kissing. It wasn't just physical, it was a profound connection that transcended friendship. Mark confessed that he'd always felt something for me but had buried it deep, conforming to expectations instead of listening to his heart. I admitted my own long-held feelings, the years of watching him with others while silently wishing it could be me. As dawn broke, casting a golden glow through the curtains, we lay tangled together, both physically and emotionally spent. The reality of the situation began to settle around us like dust after a storm. Mark was still engaged. There was still a wedding planned for 3 weeks from now. There were still expectations and obligations and hearts that could be broken. What happens now? I asked, my voice small in the quiet room. Mark traced patterns on my skin, his touch now familiar in a way I never thought it would be. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I know I can't marry Elise. It wouldn't be fair to her, not when I have these feelings for you. Not when I'm not being honest about who I am." The relief I felt was immediately tempered by concern for Elise. She didn't deserve to be hurt in all this. "You need to talk to her," I said. "Soon. Before things go any further between us." He nodded, his expression serious. "I will. Today. I'll drive back to the city and talk to her face to face. She deserves that much." We fell silent again, contemplating the ripple effects of the night's revelations. Lives would change, plans would be upended, and nothing would be the same again. As the sounds of the others stirring in the cabin reached us, we reluctantly separated. Mark kissed me one last time, a promise in his touch. "No matter what happens next, I don't regret last night," he said. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm being true to myself." I watched him dress, each button of his shirt covering the marks my lips had left on his skin, physical reminders of our night together. We emerged from the room separately, me first, then Mark 15 minutes later. No one seemed to notice anything different, too busy nursing hangovers and recounting stories from the night before. Mark announced he needed to head back to the city for a work emergency, a believable excuse that no one questioned. As he packed his bag, our eyes met across the room, a secret understanding passing between us. The next few days were agonizing. I stayed at the cabin with the others, trying to act normal while my mind constantly returned to that night with Mark. Had I taken advantage of his vulnerability? Had I ruined his chance at a conventional happiness with Elise? Or had I helped him find a truth he needed to discover? I vacillated between hope and guilt, between imagining a future with Mark and preparing myself for the possibility that he might change his mind once the reality of ending his engagement set in. 3 days after the bachelor party, my phone rang. It was Mark. My heart pounded as I answered, stepping outside for privacy. "I told her," he said without preamble. His voice sounded tired but resolved. "How did she take it?" I asked, bracing for the worst. "About as well as could be expected," he sighed. "She was hurt, confused, angry, all the things she has every right to be. But in the end, she said she'd rather know now than after we were married. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by concern for both Mark and Elise. "Are you okay?" I asked. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'm processing," he finally said. "It's a lot to work through. Calling off the wedding, coming out to my family, figuring out what I want my life to look like now. But I also feel lighter, like I've put down a weight I didn't even know I was carrying." We talked for hours that night, planning nothing concrete but exploring possibilities. Mark needed time to sort through his new reality, and I needed to be sure that what we had wasn't just the product of a confused moment. We agreed to take things slowly, to give each other space to process the seismic shifts in our lives. The weeks that followed were a strange mix of endings and beginnings. Mark faced the difficult task of explaining to friends and family why the wedding was canceled. Some were supportive, others less so. I stayed in the background, not wanting to complicate an already complex situation. We saw each other occasionally, careful to maintain boundaries while we figured out what we wanted. 2 months after that fateful bachelor party night, Mark invited me to dinner at his apartment. He'd moved out of the place he'd shared with Elise and into a smaller space that was entirely his own. When I arrived, I found the table set with candles, good wine, and Mark looking more at peace than I'd ever seen him. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said as we sat across from each other. "About that night, about us, about who I am and what I want." My heart tightened, preparing for rejection. Instead, he reached across the table and took my hand. "That night changed everything for me, Jason. It forced me to confront truths I'd been avoiding for years. And the biggest truth is that I have feelings for you. Real, deep feelings that go beyond friendship." The hope that bloomed in my chest was almost painful in its intensity. "I have feelings for you too," I admitted. "I have for years." His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "I know this is complicated," he continued. "I'm still figuring out who I am, and there's baggage from the engagement. But if you're willing to be patient with me, to take this journey together, I'd like to see where this could go." That night marked the beginning of something new for both of us. We took things slowly, dating properly, learning each other in this new context. There were challenges. Mark's parents struggled with his coming out, some friends chose sides after the broken engagement, and Mark himself had moments of doubt and identity crisis. But through it all, we built something beautiful together, something honest and true. A year later, we returned to Dave's cabin by the lake, the place where everything had changed. As we stood on the deck under the stars, Mark took my hands in his. "I never imagined my life would take this turn," he said, his voice full of emotion. "But standing here with you, I know without a doubt that this is exactly where I'm supposed to be." He kissed me then, under the same moon that had witnessed our first honest moment together. Looking back now, it's strange to think how one night, one unexpected request, could alter the course of multiple lives so dramatically. Mark and I are still together, building a life that neither of us had planned, but that feels more right than anything that came before. Elise eventually found someone new, someone who loves her completely and honestly. And Mark has found a peace within himself that was missing before, an authenticity that radiates from him. Sometimes the most unexpected detours lead us exactly where we need to go. Sometimes a moment of courage, of vulnerability, can unlock a door we never even knew existed. And sometimes, when we least expect it, we find ourselves exactly where we belong. For Mark and me, it took a bachelor party gone awry, a moment of truth, and the courage to step into the unknown. But what we found on the other side was worth every moment of uncertainty, every difficult conversation, every tear shed along the way. We found each other, and in doing so, we found ourselves. Total_char_count, 18,615.